I spent my whole life putting my family first, sacrificing my own needs to care for them. But when I needed them the most, when I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed, they were nowhere to be found. Instead of a daughter's comforting presence, I found a note. Gone for 12 days. Hope you're better when we get back. That's when I realized I wasn't just invisible to them. I was expendable. I woke up in a place I didn't recognize. My body ached as if every inch had been beaten, bruised, and stretched beyond its limits. The sterile white walls of the hospital room made my throat tighten with a sense of unease, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as if they too were aware of the cold, disconnected feeling in the air. I tried to speak, but my mouth was so dry it felt like it had been coated in sandpaper. My tongue scraped against the roof of my mouth, and I reached for the glass of water beside me, but it slipped from my hand. A soft cough followed by a low voice made me turn my head. A nurse, a man middle-aged with a neatly trimmed beard, was standing by the door. He must have noticed the struggle because he quickly crossed the room to help me sit up. His hands were warm, careful, and he offered me a sip of water. I drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing the burn in my throat. "Just take it slow," he said, his voice gentle but strained. "How are you feeling?" I tried to speak again, but my voice cracked. I coughed, then whispered, "What happened?" "You were in an accident," he said, his eyes flickering nervously. "You had a heart attack, then went into cardiac arrest. You were flatlining for 11 seconds. It's a miracle you woke up." 11 seconds. I'd flatlined. The words echoed in my mind, but they didn't sink in. The reality of it didn't hit me yet. I tried to sit up straighter, but the movement sent a wave of dizziness over me, and I grabbed the bed rail to steady myself. "Where's my family?" I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I even fully understood the question. "My children. Mark. Lisa." The nurse's face tightened for a fraction of a second, and his gaze shifted toward the floor before meeting my eyes again. He cleared his throat as if to cover the moment of hesitation. "I'm sure they'll be by soon," he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Just rest for now. They're probably just busy, with everything." His words hung in the air, heavy and hollow. "Busy," I echoed, my heart beginning to pound in my chest. I tried to push past the fog in my mind, but everything felt wrong. I needed them here. I had always been the one to care for them, and now I was the one lying in a bed, fighting for my life, and they weren't even here. I looked around the room, the absence of family sinking in like an anchor. The pale curtains fluttered with the slight breeze from the air vent. The machine beside my bed beeped rhythmically, a constant reminder that I was still alive, still here. But I felt like a ghost. No one was coming for me. The nurse, Carlos, his name tag read, checked my vitals and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes before he left the room, pulling the door shut softly behind him. Alone again. Hours passed, or perhaps it was just minutes. I had no real sense of time, my mind still fogged with exhaustion and confusion. But as the night deepened, I heard the sound of voices outside my room. The soft murmur of conversation, the shuffle of footsteps. I strained to hear, hoping it was my children, hoping they had finally come to check on me. But when the door opened, it wasn't Mark or Lisa. It wasn't anyone from my family at all. It was another nurse, a younger woman who moved quickly to adjust my for and take my vitals. I looked at her, trying to form words, but she didn't notice me watching. Then I heard it. Carlos, the nurse from earlier, was talking on the phone just outside my room, his voice carrying faintly through the door. "Yeah, she's stabilized. She's awake now. Do you want to speak to her?" Pause. "Okay. Just wanted to keep you in the loop." I froze, my pulse quickening. The weight of his words hit me. "Do you want to speak to her?" I didn't need to hear anything else. The pit in my stomach deepened as the realization settled in. No one had come for me. They hadn't even bothered to call. My children, the ones I had raised, the ones I had sacrificed everything for. They weren't here. Not now. Not when I needed them. The door closed softly and the nurse returned to her work. But the damage had been done. I lay back in the bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. My children, my family, they had abandoned me. It wasn't just in this moment. It had been building for years. The subtle neglect, the missed calls, the unreturned messages. I had been there for them through every hardship, every crisis, and yet when it was my turn, when I was fighting for my life, they were nowhere to be found. I turned my head to the side and looked at the small, cluttered table next to my bed. A single card rested there with a simple note written in a familiar hand. Hope you're better when we get back. Gone for 12 days. Love, Lisa. The weight of the words hit me like a slap. Gone for 12 days. My own daughter had left me to die in a hospital bed, not even caring enough to stay by my side for a single moment. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain. I was no longer sure which was worse, the physical pain from the heart attack or the suffocating ache of abandonment. But in that moment I made a decision. I was done. Done being the one who always put everyone else first. Done being the one who gave everything without asking for anything in return. When I left this hospital, I would leave them behind too. The next few days passed in a blur, a haze of nurses coming in and out, doctors checking my vitals, and the hollow emptiness of my hospital room. I was technically recovering, but my heart had already begun the process of breaking. I should have been angry, but I felt nothing but a deep, cold ache in the pit of my stomach. The absence of my family was like a physical wound, but it was one I had lived with for years. This hospital room, though, had stripped away any illusions I had left. They had abandoned me in my weakest moment, and that was the truth I couldn't escape. Carlos came in again one morning, his face wearing the same concerned look he always had. He checked the 4-drip, adjusted the settings on the machines, and asked if I was feeling all right. I didn't answer him right away. Where's my family, Carlos? I finally asked, my voice raw from too many unanswered questions. His hesitation was evident, and I noticed the way he shifted uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. They'll be here soon, he said, but this time his voice lacked the assurance it once had. They're on vacation, aren't they? I pressed. I could feel my chest tightening with the weight of the truth. They left me here to die. Carlos paused, his eyes flickering with guilt before he nodded. I'm sorry. I thought. His words trailed off and he cleared his throat awkwardly. It's hard to explain. I didn't need an explanation. I already knew. I had known for years. They had always taken, always expected, but never truly given. I had spent decades raising my children, putting them first, sacrificing pieces of myself so they could grow, so they could live the lives I never had. Now I was nothing more than an inconvenience. As Carlos left the room, I felt the heat of my tears begin to burn my eyes. I wiped them away, refusing to let the tears fall. When I was discharged a few days later, the emptiness of my situation became impossible to ignore. The sterile walls of the hospital room closed in on me, and I could feel the weight of every step as I walked toward the exit. They didn't even come to pick me up. Instead, a hospital transport van dropped me off at my doorstep, a place that should have felt like home but now felt like a prison. I stood there, staring at the house, the place I had worked so hard to build for my family, and I realized it wasn't even mine anymore. The hidden key beneath the ceramic frog, the one I had used for years to let people in when they forgot their keys, was gone. I stood on the front porch for nearly 20 minutes, waiting for someone to open the door. But no one came. Finally, the door creaked open. It wasn't Mark or Lisa. It was Rick. Rick, my son-in-law, with a Starbucks in his hand, standing in the doorway as if it was just another ordinary day. He didn't even look surprised to see me standing there. Hey, Eleanor, he said nonchalantly. I thought you were supposed to be in rehab longer. There's a delay with your flight back, huh? I blinked, stunned by his casual tone, the absence of concern in his eyes. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice shaking. Rick didn't seem to notice. He stepped aside to let me in, holding the door open with one hand. We were gonna swing by tomorrow, check in on you, he said, not even making eye contact. He seemed more preoccupied with his phone, scrolling through some message, completely unaffected by the situation. When I stepped inside, I was immediately hit by the shift in the air. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. The furniture had been rearranged, the walls half-painted, and the photo albums I had spent so much time putting together over the years were now sitting in a box on the floor, as if they were nothing more than clutter. But it wasn't just the disarray that threw me. It was the real estate flyer I found on the dining table, the picture of my house smiling up at me like a stranger's property. My house. Sold. No one had told me. No one had asked me. No one had even consulted me. It wasn't just the house. It was my life being sold off in pieces, with no regard for my presence, my feelings, my existence. I picked up the flyer and felt the heat of anger building in my chest. But I didn't let it out. I turned it over in my hands and let the weight of the betrayal sink in. Rick noticed the tension in the air. He gave a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck as he glanced at the flyer. You haven't seen the listings, huh? We were gonna move fast with this. I know you've been through a lot, but... He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. But there was no but. I felt my pulse quicken, and my mind flashed back to the power of attorney document I had signed years ago when I had surgery on my hip. Lisa had rushed me to sign it, saying it was just a precaution for insurance purposes. I had been in too much pain, too out of it from the anesthesia to question it. But they had used that signature, that precaution, to erase me. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of stale coffee in the air. The countertop was covered in papers, but one stood out. A power of attorney document signed with my name. I opened the folder and my heart dropped. There was my signature, dated 2 years ago. But this wasn't a form I had signed in full consciousness. I hadn't agreed to this. They had signed my life away without me. Rick's voice came from behind me. Look, Eleanor, he began, we're just doing what's best for everyone. You understand that, right? It's not like Where's Lisa? I interrupted, my voice shaking now. Where is she, Rick? Where is my family? Rick hesitated, his face turning pale. But I didn't wait for his answer. I was done waiting for explanations that would never come. I walked into the living room, my eyes scanning the disarray. My heart broke again. This wasn't just my house anymore. It was their house now. I reached for the iPad, plugged into the wall in the corner near the pantry. It was Erin's old iPad. She must have forgotten to log out. But I didn't care about that. I didn't care about anything but the truth. The messages were still open. I began reading the texts between Lisa and Rick. The words sliced through me like glass. House goes on MS Monday, one of them said. If she's not home yet, we'll start the assisted living intake. The weight of those words crushed me. It wasn't just about a house. It was about me. I was being erased. I wasn't just a mother. I was a problem to be solved. A burden to be moved aside. I stood there, frozen, and then without thinking I opened the pantry and pulled out the box where I had stashed my emergency cash. The notebook with all my passwords was tucked inside too. I had been preparing for something like this for years, though I hadn't known it would come this way. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I would just fade away quietly into the background while they sold everything I had worked for. But they were wrong. I didn't waste any time. I couldn't afford to. The next morning I called James Pute, the lawyer who had helped me with my will years ago. He was a former student of mine, someone I had watched grow from a quiet young man into a sharp attorney with his own practice. I trusted him. He was the one person I could turn to now. I didn't tell him everything over the phone, only that there was an urgent matter with the power of attorney, something about real estate and my family using my signature without my consent. He didn't ask questions, he just told me to come in immediately. When I arrived at his office, he greeted me warmly, but I could see the concern in his eyes as I explained everything. The forms they had used, the house they were selling without my permission, the fact that they had turned me into a pawn in their game. James listened quietly as I spoke, his eyes narrowing at certain parts of my story. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this, Eleanor, he said softly. But we can fight it. You're right, they went too far. This wasn't just a power of attorney issue. It's a violation of your trust, your autonomy. He didn't say much after that, but his quiet confidence made me feel like I had a fighting chance. He agreed to help me immediately, filing the necessary paperwork to have the power of attorney invalidated and reinstating my control over the house and finances. I had to move fast. I knew that. But as I sat in James' office, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just reclaiming my house, I was reclaiming my life. The woman I had been, the one who had always put others before herself, was gone. In her place stood someone determined to make her own decisions, to take back what had been stolen from her. I didn't tell James everything. I didn't tell him how I planned to leave once everything was sorted. How I was going to disappear. He wouldn't have understood. Back at the house, things had gotten worse. The furniture had been moved out, more things boxed up, and the reality of my family's plan began to sink in. They weren't just preparing for assisted living. They were preparing to erase me from their lives completely. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I knew the house wouldn't be mine for long. I wasn't trying to save it, I was trying to empty it before they could. I spent the next few days packing up everything that had meaning to me. My wedding photos, the old family portraits that hung on the walls, the trinkets I had kept over the years. Everything else I sold or gave away. The idea of leaving anything behind felt like a betrayal to myself. I called a realtor, a woman I knew who had helped me with property management in the past. She was sympathetic when I explained the situation, and she helped me list the house quickly under my own name. Once I had the house back in my hands, I changed the locks, told Rick to come get his things, and left him a message through the Ring camera. If you want your tools, come get them. After today, they're gone. I watched him take his things quietly without a word. The entire situation was surreal, like something out of a bad dream. But I wasn't dreaming. This was real. This was my life. By the time the house was officially listed under my name, I was already making my exit. I wasn't going to wait around for more of their apologies or their guilt. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't even need the life I had worked so hard to create for them. I took what little money I had left, withdrew it from the bank accounts, and opened a new one, under a different name. Nora Whitman. It felt like a rebirth, the beginning of something entirely new. I cashed out everything I could, transferred it into money orders, and stashed it all away. My car was the last thing I kept. A dusty silver Corolla that no one would notice. It was perfect for disappearing. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even James. The night before I left, I sat in the empty living room, the space echoing with memories. The familiar creaks of the floorboards, the faint smell of old furniture, the shadows of the past lingering in the corners. I sat on a folding chair, eating a peanut butter sandwich on a paper plate, feeling the weight of everything I was leaving behind. I wrote 2 letters. One to Lisa, one to Mark. I didn't place blame in them, not directly. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I simply said, "You taught me who you really are. Thank you for the education." It wasn't a farewell, not in the way they would have wanted it. It was the last lesson I would ever give them, the final act of me releasing them from any further obligations to me. I left the letters on the kitchen counter, unplugged the fridge, and took the spare key out of the ceramic frog in the yard. I didn't look back. Not once. By sunrise, I was on the road. I drove north on I-95 with no destination in mind, no plan. My old life was behind me, and ahead was nothing but open road. For the first time in years, I felt free. I stopped at a small town called Elkport, a place I found on a billboard that simply said, "Welcome to Elkport Library, voted friendliest place in Maine." Sounded perfect. Quiet, small, nothing to tie me down. I rented a room at a rundown motor inn, paying for a week in cash. It didn't matter what happened next. I was starting over. I didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, Elkport became the place I never thought I needed. There was a quiet kind of peace that settled over me in this small town. Life moved slowly, and I reveled in that slowness. I spent my mornings at the library, organizing shelves, helping the librarian, and feeling like a part of something again. Something that didn't depend on who I used to be. I even made a few friends. Lily, the young waitress at the local diner, and her daughter, Emma, who called me Nana Nora. I didn't correct her. I liked the sound of it, the warmth that came with that small act of affection. It was a small, new world. One where I was not defined by the scars of my past but by the person I was becoming. I still kept a notebook under my pillow where I wrote down all the little lies I had to tell. My new name, Nora Whitman. My new backstory as a retired librarian from Roanoke, Virginia. No one asked me questions, and I didn't offer any answers. I lived for the present. But despite the stillness of my new life, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was all too quiet. That someone would come looking for me. After all, I had walked away from everything. And while I was relieved to be free, I knew the price of that freedom might be steep. The truth is, I wasn't running from my past. I was removing myself from it. But I was still, somewhere deep inside, afraid that it would catch up with me. That my old life would come knocking at my door, dragging the people I had left behind with it. Came in the most unexpected way. One day, about a month after I'd arrived in Elkport, I was at the library shelving a stack of books, when Lily burst through the door. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she handed me her phone, the screen flashing with a notification that sent a cold shiver through my spine. Found her. Grandma Ghost is alive and well in Maine. She changed her name. She's got a new family, and we love her even more now. The post had come from a local Facebook group, a community page for Elkport, but it had quickly spread across the internet. My old name, my real name, was tagged in the post. There in full view was a picture of me at Emma's birthday party. Me sitting beside the child I had grown to love, handing her gifts, laughing, completely unaware that I was being filmed. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. There was no denying it. The truth had caught up with me. Someone had figured it out. Someone had connected the dots. The comments below the video were a mixture of praise and judgment. Some called me a hero, others a coward. A few even said they admired my boldness, the way I had disappeared from a life that had never truly appreciated me. But there were others who accused me of abandoning my real family, of leaving my children when they needed me the most. I hadn't seen the video before, but now it was everywhere. It was a scandal. It was my scandal. I felt my chest tighten as the flood of notifications continued to pour in. It wasn't just local anymore. The post was picked up by several news outlets. People started speculating on why I had disappeared, why I had left my family behind, and how they had treated me. The news stories focused not on my recovery, but on the twisted dynamic between me and my children. The more the public dug into my past, the more the story of my life began to unravel, piece by piece. Lily stood beside me, her eyes wide with disbelief as the phone buzzed in her hand. "I had no idea, Nora," she whispered. "I thought you were just starting over. I didn't know your family had treated you like that." "I didn't want you to know," I said quietly, my heart racing. I hadn't expected the story to reach Elkport, let alone the entire internet. I didn't want anyone to know who I used to be. Not here. Not now. Lily didn't say anything for a long time. She just watched me, her eyes full of sympathy. Then, slowly, she sat down at the small table near the library's window and said, "So what happens now?" I didn't know. I had worked so hard to bury my past, to leave it behind, to be free. But now it was coming back to haunt me, to force me to face the people I had once called family. The people who hadn't even cared enough to show up when I was lying in a hospital bed, barely clinging to life. I felt like I had been violated. Like my privacy, my new life had been torn apart. But there was also something else. Something darker, something that had been buried deep inside me. Bigger. I had lived my life for others, sacrificing myself for the sake of my children, my ex-husband, even my extended family. But now, I wasn't their pawn anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't a helpless woman who needed saving. I was Nora, and Nora didn't need anyone, least of all them. That night, I sat in my small trailer, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. The phone had stopped ringing. The messages had slowed. But I knew it wouldn't last. I knew my family would find me. They'd track me down, confront me, apologize, or maybe not. But I wasn't going to wait for that. I couldn't afford to. And then the doorbell rang. I stood frozen, listening to the chime echo through the small trailer. It wasn't Lily. He would have knocked. It wasn't anyone from Elkport either. No one would dare intrude at this hour. I grabbed the worn baseball bat I kept under the kitchen sink and quietly moved to the door. Through the small window in the door, I saw the unmistakable shape of a car parked in front of the trailer. A car I knew well. It was Aaron. My breath caught in my throat. He had come for me. The doorbell rang again, and I stood there, staring at the silver handle, my fingers tightening around the baseball bat. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, each beat a reminder of everything I had left behind, and everything I had fought to forget. I didn't want to see her. Not now. Not like this. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. With a deep breath, I set the bat down on the kitchen counter, my hands trembling slightly as I unlocked the door. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking as if even the house itself knew how heavy this moment was. And there she was. Erin. She stood on the doorstep, her face pale, her eyes red from what I could only assume had been days of crying. She was dressed casually, jeans and a cardigan, her posture rigid, as if she were still trying to live up to some unspoken expectation that had been placed on her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, staring at each other across the threshold. She looked exactly the same, and yet nothing about her seemed familiar anymore. She wasn't the daughter who had once sat beside me on the couch, laughing over family dinners. She wasn't the girl I had once raised, who had clung to me when life felt too big to handle. Now she was a stranger standing in front of me, a stranger who had left me to die alone in a hospital bed. "I thought you were dead," Erin finally said, her voice breaking slightly. I thought you were gone." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. He thought I was dead. But I wasn't. I came because I need to know why, Mom, she continued, her words stumbling over each other. We didn't know, okay? We didn't know how bad it was. I thought you were going to be fine. But when we got back, everything was different. You were gone. You didn't even leave a note, nothing. You didn't say anything. I crossed my arms over my chest, taking in her words, her excuses, the desperate need in her eyes. But I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I couldn't bring myself to care. The truth was staring me in the face, and it hurt more than I had ever imagined. The truth that I had been nothing but an afterthought to her. To them all. I wasn't dead, Aaron, I finally said, my voice quiet but firm. I was alive. But you didn't care, did you? None of you cared. She winced, the words stinging more than she had expected. I could see her trying to process it all, trying to find the right words, but she couldn't. She wasn't ready to face the consequences of her actions. Not yet. I didn't know how to handle it, she whispered, her eyes dropping to the ground. I didn't know how to handle watching you, getting weaker. I didn't know what to do, and You left me, I cut in, my voice rising for the first time. You left me in that hospital alone. And then I stopped, shaking my head. You started selling my house. You were planning to put me in some nursing home while you sold my life piece by piece. I didn't need you to fix me, Aaron. I needed you to be there. I needed you to show up. But you didn't. Her breath hitched, and I could see the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. But this time I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt a relief. It was the kind of relief that comes when you finally let go of something that has been weighing you down for years. I thought we had time, she whispered almost to herself. I didn't think you'd really leave. I already did the funeral, I said, the words coming out like a final punctuation to everything we had never said. You just weren't there. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, like a weight neither of us could lift. Erin's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes, trying to hold herself together, but it was clear now. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. I'm not coming back, Erin, I said, my voice steady. I found a new life. A better one. And it doesn't involve pretending we were ever okay. The words were final. There was no room for negotiation. No space for an apology that would erase the years of neglect, the years of feeling invisible, the years of giving and giving without ever receiving anything in return. I had given everything to them, and in return they had left me to die alone. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping her before she could form another excuse, another plea. No, Erin, I said firmly. You don't get to rewrite this. You made your choices. And now I'm making mine. She stood there for a moment, frozen in place, before a single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but it didn't matter. He was too late. I can't change it, she said quietly, almost like a confession. I can't fix what we did. I can't fix what I did. I nodded slowly, my chest tight. No. You can't. We stood there for a long time, neither of us moving, neither of us knowing what to do next. Finally, Erin stepped back, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I'm sorry, she said, and this time I believed her. But it didn't matter. The apology wasn't for me anymore. It was for herself. She turned to leave, and I didn't stop her. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of finality. I had made my peace. I had done what I needed to do. And now I was free. Not just from them, but from the weight of trying to make them understand something they never could. I took a deep breath and walked to the small desk in the corner of the trailer. There, I pulled out the letter I had written to myself, the one I had been holding onto since I left Charleston. The words on the paper were simple, but they were true. You did it. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the small box I had kept under the bed, alongside the only photo I had left of my daughters, the one taken long before they had learned the word inheritance. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had nothing left to prove. The next morning, I woke up early, the sunlight streaming through the small windows of my trailer. I could hear the sounds of birds outside and the rustle of the wind through the trees. It was a quiet morning, the kind I had come to love in Elkport. Emma came running over to my door, holding a small seashell she had found by the lake. Nana, look what I found, she yelled excitedly, her eyes shining with joy. I smiled and took the shell from her, holding it in my palm. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in Charleston. Not with my past. But here in this small town with people who saw me for who I truly was, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, but as Nora. And for the first time in years I felt whole again. As I've walked this journey of reclaiming my life, I've learned that it's never too late to change, to let go, and to rebuild. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone to find yourself again? Share your experiences with me in the comments. I'm here to listen. And if you'd like to read more stories of transformation and strength, be sure to subscribe. Remember, we all have the power to choose our next chapter.